If you're like me, you've got contacts in every single possible format: email, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And it's becoming harder and harder to stay on top of them. To help me make sense of this mess, I use Smarter Contacts, the free app that automatically creates rich profiles for all my contacts right on my smartphone. The thing I love most about this app are the rich profiles it creates. I can see photos, job titles, company details, and updates from social networks all in one place, all in context. This is a free app and available on all mobile platforms. Head to www.untether.tv/smarter to download it today. Hello everybody, welcome to Untether.tv, that place you come to every day, every week, every month, as often as you do. I really appreciate it, to hear about these companies that are changing the way that we are doing business, that on top of that mobile world, that they're creating these things, these businesses, as the industry is evolving. What a big challenge these guys have, and I love talking to entrepreneurs in this space, simply because, boy, they're learning as we're learning. They're inventing as we're learning, and that's the coolest part of this. Today, well, you know, maybe I'll paint a picture before, is that we've all talked about the power of location-aware advertisements, targeted advertisements, targeting, where you stand, at the very place you stand, making sure that you're getting the most relevant information onto your phone as possible based on your surroundings. And that's the promise of this company, PlaceIQ. You think about they've broken the world into 100 million different tiles, and each tile, they say, is about the size of a block, and they know what goes in that block at any given point in time, not just static information, who's in there now, what's going on now, and then they infer and they create value for the consumer who is actually standing in that spot at that moment. Really cool. We're going to dive into this. I've got Duncan McCall, who's the co-founder and CEO all the way from Boulder, Colorado, but about to move to New York City. Duncan, thanks for coming on to Untether and sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Rob. Thanks very much for having us.
So I got to ask right off the bat, can you give us an example of of something that you guys have, a company that you've worked for, a client that you've worked with that has had massive benefit from your service? You have any examples? I'm sure you do.
Absolutely. And the term massive benefit was yours, not mine.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Yeah.
So one of the things we're doing, there's a number of different markets we're working in, and one of them, so the preeminent market we're focused on, is mobile advertising. So the optimization of mobile advertising, as mobile ad impressions are increasingly location aware, we have a solution that helps ad networks, advertisers, actually send a much more relevant, timely message to consumers. So one quick example, we have a large QSR restaurant that's one of our clients. One of our first clients, we've run a bunch of campaigns with them. They had this requirement. They wanted to be able to target intenders for late night dining on a mobile platform. So you start to think about that and you say, well, how do you reach intenders for late night dining? Are there certain mobile apps? Are there certain mobile websites that they're actually looking at? Well, not really. It's very difficult to reach them then, if you think about that. So what we do is we use the context of location. We're able to say, okay, we don't know who these individuals are. Very privacy friendly. We're not figuring out who they are and following, but we're saying if somebody is in a certain location and exhibits a very strong intent towards late night dining, they would be a great intender. So very simply, it's a pretty easy example, we were able to find in a bunch of cities the areas that contain intenders for late night dining. Unsurprisingly, people coming out of bars and nightclubs, people coming out of subway stations, college students, blue-collar workers, shift workers, commuters. So we're now able to, because location is inherent to many mobile ad impressions, find those ad impressions that are people coming out of subway stations, people coming out of bars, and without knowing who those users are, be able to say they are a good intender for fast food. So we're serving an ad to them. However, we're not serving an ad to somebody 2 blocks away who might be in a gym or might be at home and we feel isn't a good intender for fast food. So simple example of using location context to be able to actually optimize the serving of mobile advertisement. And there's 2 sort of value propositions there. One is you've now got a much smarter mobile media spend because you're targeting the right audience. And secondarily, it's much more performant. We A/B tested this, and we proved a quite significant uplift in performance because obviously now you're targeting a greater percentage of intenders. And then, of course, from a consumer side, now people who are actually more likely to be interested in the product are seeing the ads, not other people. So that's hopefully is a reasonable example of how we've been able to add value in the mobile space.
And was it? I mean, for those examples, I mean, are there expectations that are set around the return on investment? Because ultimately, I think of mobile advertising. I think of any advertising, and the conversion rates are so small. And but the promise of mobile is that exactly what you're talking about, that hyper-targeted, very personalized to your situation and your location kind of event. Now, so did they notice an increase in what I suppose in advertising, mobile advertising, it's click-throughs or engagement?
Absolutely. So that's one of the challenges with the sort of somewhat nascent mobile advertising market is how do you measure performance? Yeah. And obviously on mobile apps, there's concern, well, people mean to click that advertisement. Maybe it was a mistake. However, so with the caveat that it's still early in the quantification of performance, most of our clients, if they're focused on measuring performance, and not everybody is, they're focused on this concept of a CTR, engagement with the advertisement. And then there's maybe a bunch of post-click metrics there. So in terms of CTR, we have pretty much every campaign we've run so far. We've A/B tested, so we put ourselves up because we're still early. We have to be able to prove the value of this. We put ourselves up against what the client was doing with their existing targeting, and I think every single campaign we've run was something from 39% to about 160 something percent increased performance in terms of CTR. So we've been able to prove that this does work. This results in an increased engagement and performance because we're targeting the right users.
It would only seem logical that if you're pushing the right ad at the right person at the right time, that they would be a little bit more receptive to that.
Absolutely, I think it's for us, it's a powerful proxy to find audience. And if you can find your audience, you're going to find people who are interested in your product.
So, great example, and I love that. It's concrete. Listen, people can understand and relate to that. But the company itself, so PlaceIQ, how long have you guys been around for?
So we set the company up, probably about a year and a half ago, something like that. I've lost track now. It seems like a decade already. Exactly. So the framing the company, we did the usual thing. We built a prototype. We wandered in the wilderness while people looked at us and said, this is crazy. Mobile advertising is never going anywhere. And then people started to think, maybe there is something here. We had a bunch of customers who said, hey, if you guys build this, we will pay you for it. So we ended up raising a seed round of $1 million, led by IA Venture Partners, Roger Ehrenberg out of New York, and a bunch of other folks as well, who are early supporters. It was about a year ago. We built the product out last winter. In Boulder, we had some short days, and we got our heads down and built our product out. We started engaging with customers late spring, early summer of what is last year now, and had some pretty interesting success. A lot of work to do yet. We're still early in this, but we were lucky enough to prove enough interest, success in the market that we just closed a Series A financing of $4.2 million. And as you mentioned at the beginning, we're focused on building a really interesting business here, and we think it can be quite a significant business. And so we decided to move the company to New York. So that's kind of the status of where the company is.
Lots of companies that play around in this space, right? You've got big guys that are collecting a lot of data. Big guys, I say big guys in the mobile space, like Foursquare and all those guys. They're collecting and harvesting that data. You've got other data providers that have been in this business for quite some time, whether they're GPS kind of focus companies beforehand. But the difference between all of these guys is that you're pulling all of that information and you're bringing that into what I would say is machine smarts, right? So you're collecting data about locations from commercial data points, retail data. You're collecting crime rate. You're collecting social stuff from all of those other companies, and then you're mashing it together to give a sense of what's going on in that spot, right?
Absolutely. So I think if you look at what we do. We pull together a lot of location-based data, right? So if you look at the social stuff, that's probably a small fraction of the data we pull together. Many different data sets. New, old, existing, static, dynamic, some updated twice daily, some updated once every 10 years, like the census data, which is still great data. Yeah. So then what we do, the aggregation, the ingest, normalization of that, it's not trivial, but we don't feel that is a core differentiator for us. What we do that's really hard is making sense of this data. So the ability to look at social data, photo tag data, maybe mobile cell phone density data, along with census data, retail transaction data, event data, what type of events are going on in a place, and more about this type of event, what type of person likely comes to that event, and what type of behaviors do they have, what ads have we seen click before, what types of searches. If I see one tile that has Goldman Sachs, one tile that has a hiking trail, one tile that has a U2 concert, how do I delineate between those? You start to think about just place attributes. Nobody's even really built an understanding of different types of places, behaviors, and people associated with those. So we have built a very large ontology and taxonomy of places that has come from years and years of thinking. We didn't just sort of invent this overnight.
It's not arbitrary over the last year. You've just invented this.
No,
based on your preferences and your likes. Hey, I like U2, so you must like Springsteen too.
There you go. So a lot of thinking and work has come into that many years. But then what we do on top of it is we machine learn on top of it. So you think of maybe U2 and Bruce Springsteen, we're getting pretty specific here, but you start to think about, well, imagine today's world without violating anyone's privacy. You can look at the digital signals coming from those types of events and say, so what are people searching for at a U2 concert versus a Bruce Springsteen concert? What types of engagement, what types of devices, what types of photos, what are they saying, what are they doing, what are they buying when they come out of there? And you can start to build up a statistical understanding of these two groups of people behave differently. And now start to think about how you spread that out across the US. You can build some really interesting machine learning from that. So part of our core IP is taking all of these fragmented, unstructured data sources that on their own may be interesting but don't really tell you a lot, and putting them together and making sense of them, and also outputting an actionable piece of business intelligence that can actually be used in a productive, monetizable way. That's our real focus.
I got two questions on that. The first one is a very serious question. Does this drive you crazy? Because every time you uncover one set of data or data points, it probably opens up to 1,000 different thoughts of what you can do with that and how it can relate together, and it's kind of like this endless loop where at some point you've thought about it for so long that you're in a corner banging your head on the wall in a straitjacket because you've gone absolutely stir crazy with the amount of potential this has. Do you feel that sometimes? Yeah,
no, absolutely. So I think one way I would sort of express some of those challenges is, so if you take a step back, we had a year to prove that, hey, we can build a business here.
Yeah.
And there's so much data you can play with. We could have spent 5 years ingesting data, drawing amazing graphs, showing visualizations, doing infographics, and saying, look at all these cool correlations. But what we had to really discipline ourselves to do is say, look, we're going to do not necessarily the bare minimum, but we can't spend a year and a half doing a science project here. We've got to do something that we can prove actually moves the needle and we can build a business from. So we look at all the data sets out there, all the huge potential, all the opportunity to create machine learning, statistical understanding, correlations. I mean, things like looking at weather. How does weather affect all these?
But it's only one piece.
It's only one piece. Traffic. And there's a million different pieces, right?
Yeah.
So we had to really discipline ourselves. So absolutely, both the challenge and opportunity is there's so much data and so much potential. You have to be very, very careful to discipline yourself to say, okay, we're going to prove this works because we're not a research institute here. So that in itself was actually quite a bit of a challenge, and still is one, to be honest.
Well, I'm sure, because there are so many different factors. I mean, at least with the human body, there's only your senses that play into this, and that has infinite impact on decision making and basically what it comes down to what you eat and what you feel like. How you live your life, but this has many multiple layers, and I think that if you think about it too long, you will go crazy, completely stir crazy, and it's interesting to see that. So it leads me to this question about, so at what point do you have just enough or just the right amount of data to make a good enough assumption and then be able to display that? But it's not the perfect assumption, but it's good enough to bump click-through rate or engagement rates. Like, at what point do you guys decide that you have enough data?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So one of the things is, it's not no simple answer to that. So one of the things is we had to, two ways. So we're building a context engine. So, if I was to give you a demo, I could show you we have about 50% of the US population covered at 100-meter tile level. And and I can click in any one of these tiles, and I can look at the audience characteristics there. We can look at the engagement, what types of ads, what are people searching for, what types of coupons they're redeeming, all sorts of attributes. You start to think of our analytics that says, without knowing who these individuals are, based upon all the signals, the digital exhaust that's coming out of this tile, what type of people we think are actually in this location. So to build that algorithm, to be honest, there's a lot of trial and error. So we, last winter we sat down, and the good thing is you can QA it, right? Because hey, we know what a city really looks like. We use San Francisco. I lived there 10 years. And we spent months and months going backwards and forwards, tweaking our algorithms until we were able to say, this is a pretty good representation of how a city really looks in a hyper-local context. So that was one way we were able to measure how we could sort of really output an accurate understanding of a location. The second way, in terms of how could we actually prove this would result in an uplift, that's down to consumers, right? So at the end of the day, you've got to go all the way through there, and you've got to run an ad campaign. So we focused on finding some customers who were willing to work with us in an early innovative project and engage with us and try this out. And luckily, we found some pretty innovative folks who would do that. And so that was absolutely, you've got to build that engine, you've got to tweak it, but then you've got to apply it as soon as possible and then go back and keep iterating. So, like in any startup today, right, rapid experimentation and iteration is certainly very pertinent.
All right, so I mean, you've gone through that process, and I got to ask, what was the inspiration to get into this business? Because you must have looked around as you were thinking about this, that there are a lot of companies that are out there that are playing in this space or trying to play in this space. Not the least of which is a company like Facebook or a company like Google that are very highly localized, highly local search, and have kind of dipped their foot into this space, but are still trying to figure it out. So why you guys? Why get into this?
Yeah. So and
have you changed your mind? And no, I'm just joking. No,
no change of heart. Yeah, especially if my investors are watching. No. So there's a couple of things. So historically, my personal background is a background in sort of enterprise software consulting, internet technologies, and then I got into the location space quite a few years ago. Primarily originally through an RFID project, and then into a whole bunch of other things. I did a previous company that was a geo-focused, almost wiki of places, if you will. And I'd been lucky enough to spend a lot of time traveling. I won't bore you with a long story about traveling through African minefields with GPS devices, but actually that's where part of the inspiration for my involvement in the location space came from, was downloading waypoints in Africa to get across a minefield in Mauritania.
it's motivational right there.
Which was
it worked.
It totally worked. Yeah,
clearly.
I will tag, but other than that, yeah. So I mean, it's an example of, this was quite a long time ago. It's an example of crowd sharing location intelligence, and from that, I spent a lot of time bouncing across Africa in a small 4x4, and started thinking, in the future, people are going to share a tremendous amount of information that is location aware. And then from that, started thinking, there's already a tremendous amount of this. And so, a year and a half ago, I mean, in my mind, we had really crossed this paradigm whereby there's enough digital signals being created that are location aware, that really, if you looked at all of those in an intelligent way, you would be able to infer the context of a location in a privacy-friendly, scalable fashion, and that was only going to grow. So that was kind of the inspiration behind it. And then if you think about, so why us? Why would we take this on? It was pretty simple to me. So we've assembled a fantastic team that understands geo, advertising, big data, and it's a typical cliche. We're focused, right? Yeah. So we're focused. We're not building consumer apps. We're not building iPhone apps. We're not trying to have people share the location. We are focused on being the best business in the world at essentially creating an index of the physical world, looking at all this data and making sense of it. That is what we do. And even if you look at the guys, the Facebooks, the Googles of this world, we've got 1,000,001 priorities. We get up every single day, and all we think about is being the best in the world and extracting actionable intelligence from location data. So that's why we feel that this is a really, really interesting opportunity for us.
Well, I mean, it clearly is, and mobile is nothing without location, right? And I think that there's that convergence that's happening right now in this world where it is big data on a small screen, really, which is what you're talking about, these devices can be so dumb as long as the data that it's connecting to is the smartest of smarts. And the computational power of what you guys are putting together, your algorithms, and then outputting it based on a location, it's kind of like the final key that opens up that door, right? So this is, could you have done this? Maybe it's a silly question, but could you have done this 3 years ago, 4 years ago? Or is this the right time? Or are you too early still?
So I think two answers there. I think you could have done it 3-4 years ago. There's still a tremendous amount of location data out there. Mm-hmm. I think the application of it would have been a lot harder. You wouldn't have found a monetizable stream for it quite as well. And I think there's less interesting data. A few years ago. However, there's still a tremendous amount of potential. So if you look at today's world, there's just more and more data being created now. And then there's also, I think, from a timing perspective, right, the classic cliche of you building a startup is, one of the things that is always outside of your control is market timing. Yeah. It doesn't matter how amazing your execution is, if the market isn't ready, you're dead in the water, and we see many examples of that. So from my perspective, you don't want to be too early, you don't want to be too late. I think the timing for us has been great, and I couldn't have planned it any better. We've been very lucky with the market timing in terms of the rise of data being created, the ability and the acceptance of people to share data, the ability and the acceptance of people to be able to use that data in privacy-friendly ways, and then this explosion now in mobile advertising on smartphone platform that really drives a very interesting use case for us.
And that last piece about the mobile advertising, we've talked about it because that's what everybody talks about, location-aware advertising and marketing. But that's just one piece, right? It's got to be the first step for you guys. It's the lowest hanging. It's a terrible way of phrasing it, but it's the lowest hanging fruit because it's not as efficient. I mean, display advertising on a mobile device is not sold out, so to speak. So it needs to be a little bit more targeted. So that's the first place you guys are looking at. That's not the end game for you guys.
No, so I think the way to look at this is our vision, our mission with this business is to build this index of the physical world, to index every 100-meter tile in this country, in this continent, in this world potentially, that is meaningful, and understand audience, intent, conversion, characteristics, correlations between all these data sets in a privacy-friendly, scalable way to allow businesses and consumers to make better decisions. So if you take that as the end game, there's obviously multiple steps to get there. And if you look at mobile advertising, mobile is just a great fit, increasingly location-aware in terms of mobile ad impressions with hyperlocal or zip. And then if you're on a mobile device, you are inherently influenced by the context of your environment. If you're out drinking with friends, you're at a ball game, you're at home, you're at work, you're a tourist, you're a local, you're an auto repair technician, you're a financial and tech worker, your environment tells a lot about your behavior. And then unlike online, whereby you're typically in home, at work, or maybe one other location, in mobile you have that device with you at all times. So the ability to use location as a key to understand how people behave, like my example for late night diners, is just so powerful on mobile. So for us, that was a great opportunity. And then of course, if you look at the mobile technology space, ad tech space, cookies and pixels, the mature technologies, if you want to say that, online, they don't roll over into mobile. So it's I wouldn't say it's a complete blue sky, but there's a lot of greenfield opportunity in mobile to be able to implement new targeting technologies. And then most importantly, there's a lot of a very understandable concern around privacy in mobile. Right. Rightly or wrongly, it is sort of viewed slightly differently. So when people look at new targeting technologies, they want to see something that is privacy friendly, that is scalable, and that also that makes sense. And I think because it's about the context of somebody's location, everybody seems to understand that, our customers, our partners. So so mobile for us is a great first step. There are other markets. We've actually run online campaigns where we're using zip-based data to optimize online campaigns. Yeah. We haven't run many, but the ones we've run have been highly performant. We're doing some very interesting things now, backing into, amazingly, TV planning, which we never anticipated. We're starting to do things with out-of-home, digital out-of-home. But our primary focus absolutely remains on mobile because we think there's a tremendous value proposition and differentiator there.
All right. Well, I've got to ask around two questions around this, and then I want to jump into the benefits of all of this. Not only collecting the data, but how companies can benefit from this. But the first thing is, What about intellectual property? When you guys are building this out, do you look at IP? Do you look at kind of wrapping around some patents around what you guys are doing, or are you looking at opening this up to allow others to embed into their technology as well?
So if you look at the topic of patents, right? It's been if you'd asked me 18 months ago, my belief has always been no. We don't believe in that world. It's something we're looking at now. It's just become such a tool people have used to defend and attack, and I'm not a big fan of it, but it's the world we live in. So we're looking at that. We don't have any right now. We're focused on on building a product that we think is heavily differentiated and certainly doesn't infringe on anyone's patents. So we look at that. So we are licensing. So this should be very clear in terms of the way we work. Yep. We get up every day and we think about this location context. We are running mobile ad campaigns for people right now, right. Simply because in the first year of your life, you don't want to rely on others. You do what you can to prove this works. We don't want to be in that business likely in long term in the future. We don't want to build an ad network. We want to empower others to do a better job of serving advertisements, permission marketing, messaging. So we are absolutely in the process of embedding our data, our algorithms into other people's ecosystems so that they can take advantage of it. So we really see this for us is we're empowering others to make better decisions, and we are going to focus on building out the algorithms, the data, and just making ourselves the absolute best technology and data provider for location context.
So how does that translate into revenue for you guys? Not numbers. I'm not interested in that, but a lot of companies aren't focusing exclusively on generating revenue. They don't think about that, but I know you guys are. So how do you make money, and has that kind of started to roll in now?
Yeah, I don't know if roll in would be the right term, but it doesn't roll through the door. We would drag it through the door, but no, absolutely, it's one of the advantages and maybe disadvantages of we are in the B2B space, right? So we're an enterprise company at the end of the day. So we think right from the beginning, we set out to solve a problem for customers who would pay us to solve that problem. So the good news there is, as we've begun to solve some of these problems and create a value proposition, we are able to charge for our data and services. So we're in the early stages, but we're generating revenues. We're feeling pretty optimistic about this year, but ask me in 6 months. So we are absolutely charging for the use of our data. It's pretty simple. We are a data provider primarily. So like many other data providers in the existing ad tech space, we're charging for use of our data. If you use our data in the optimization of an ad, message, many of the other applications I've talked about, then we expect to get paid. So we're charging for the use of our data.
Okay, and as you said, you're actually generating revenue, which is like such a breath of fresh air. I love it. All right, so get a good sense of this, the reasons why. But now I'd like to talk about impact because we focus a lot of time on the coolness of this. I mean, in this industry, when you start to think about what people are focusing on, it's like, hey, you know what? We can use data, or location. We can use a combination of data and location. But now it's about why. Why would somebody want to do that? We see the late night dining habits of people.
Yeah.
But why would I, as a business, be interested in taking this and using this? And why would I, as a consumer? What are the benefits to both of those guys when it comes to this kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I think it's a good question. So if you take the advertiser sort of focus and benefits. So if you're an advertiser, you're a network, you're a brand, you're an agency, you want to get your message to consumers.
Right.
The primary thing that has spanned the marketing space for years and years is this concept of being able to find audience, be it Nielsen TV ratings all the way through to cookie exchanges online. So what we are enabling here is the ability to find audience. Look, we all live in a physical world with physical beings. Location, we don't think it's the only or it's necessarily the biggest indicator, but location is an incredibly powerful indicator of intent, behavior, lots of other elements. And what we do is we use location as this proxy to find audience. in-home, out-of-home, mobile, etc. So we enable advertisers, brands, etc., to find an audience. And as I was saying earlier, the value proposition is absolutely a smarter media spend. And if you are focused on performance, it's typically more performant. So that's, at a high level, as a sort of value proposition for that side of the equation. If you look at the consumer side, so without sort of getting too pie in the sky and altruistic, so I'm a big believer that. So I've heard this story of one-to-one marketing for 15 plus years now. I won't tell you the companies that I heard it through and worked with, and I believed it, and I've never seen it really happen. Interactive TV was going to be this concept of one-to-one marketing. A brand has a relationship with an individual, and they understand that individual, their behaviors, their habits. The internet was going to do it, mobile phones were going to do it. Now, finally, with smartphones that are location aware, they know who you are, your habits, etc. You tell them a lot of information. You've got a platform that truly is a one-to-one marketing enabler. However, you start to look at, not to pick on some of the early innovators in mobile advertising, but the advertising model in mobile typically was somewhat similar to online. Let's just shove a whole bunch of ads down to people, right? And we'll just, lowest common denominator. Let's just file lots and lots of ads down. And my big concern is that we have this wonderful opportunity in mobile to create a message or a medium that is fundamentally differentiated. So I can start to say, look, I'm not going to push you ads all the time. Maybe I'm going to push you ads when you're commuting on a train, or you're at home on the couch, or you're lying on a beach on your holidays. However, when you're at work, or when you're driving, or when you're walking down the street, that might be a really bad time. When I see you in the DMV or the doctor's office and you're bored out of your mind, that could be a great time to show you a rich media ad. There's a tremendous amount you can do with permission marketing, with targeting, that I really think is meaningful to consumers. And my concern is that in the early days of mobile advertising, we've tended to focus on just rolling the business model over from online, which is just, let's train the consumer that this little ad unit at the bottom is something to be ignored for most.
Absolutely.
I would love to help create a reality whereby people look at that little strip on the bottom, and you don't show them an ad unless you have something relevant to tell them. So that when they see that ad, this likely is going to be a relevant message to me. It might be something that's relevant to me personally, relevant to the context I'm in right now, and maybe relevant to some of my habits and things I've shared. Now, we don't own that whole solution, but we think location is a tremendous enabler to help bring that solution together. So my altruistic ideal would be if we could help to play a small role in reinventing this new phase of mobile advertising to be truly meaningful for users, to not train them that it's something to be ignored, but to be totally meaningful. I think that would be a fantastic goal to shoot for, if you will.
Well, I so well said, because the promise of this technology is that, and I think that when we go forward, when we start to think about the way this technology, and especially what PlaceIQ is doing, this technology can provide to a number of industries. It can be disruptive. You talked about television as a way of doing this, and it is disruptive. There's this great example of trying to bridge that gap between the couch and the TV. It's very close, but it's very deep, this gap. About putting up a QR code during a Billy Ray Cyrus made-for-TV movie, and I think that people thought this was revolutionary. I looked at it and thought that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because they did 2 ads leading up to the QR code in each hour of the movie. So they wasted 2 30-second slots to warn people that the QR code was coming, and said, okay, go download the app, get your QR code reader ready, and these were ads. And then they scanned a QR code. And I thought, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? There's got to be some sort of inference that says, listen, I know I'm watching that show, or the machine knows I'm watching that show because it does an audio detect or something to that extent. They know it's 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, so it can bring that down. They know where I am, quite literally. They know what my proclivities are, my habits, everything like that. So display something that might be of interest to me, all right? I think we're at a dumb stage right now, and I think that's where PlaceIQ brings that level of intelligence into the conversation. It's more of a statement, but boy, when I heard that QR code, it was like, what are we doing?
I think another example could be you take digital out of home. Potentially, a tremendous amount of promise. Some great companies working in that space.
Yep.
a lot of innovation, although it's it has some challenges with the sort of the old media business model. But I think of digital screens. You walk into a coffee shop or a gym, you've got these screens running that are running customized advertisements that aren't all that smart. And you think, well, wouldn't it be great if I'm there and I'm looking at my phone and I'm seeing I'm going to see an ad, just be clear, because it's an ad-supported app I'm looking at. So instead of seeing something completely irrelevant, I'm seeing something that's actually relevant to the context of my environment. Maybe I'm in a coffee shop in a tourist area at a tourist time, so it's going to be something tourist-related. And maybe on the following Monday, it might be something financial tech because the financial workers are back. But so I'm in this coffee shop or this gym, and now I see an ad, and it's maybe correlated or connected to the ad that's running on the screens. Right. Maybe it's the other half of it. Maybe it prompts me to look there. So I feel like it's a holistic experience, right? There's some intelligence to this. It's relevant. I have a method to give feedback. This ad was relevant or not. You look at the technology we have now, there's a tremendous amount of potential to connect those all and make them smarter. But as you're alluding to, it is early days, and we are experimenting, and some of them maybe seem a little bit rough around the edges right now. But I'm certainly confident that the tools are there, and I think the media companies are really starting to innovate now. And I think as we start to pull these pieces together, and then you take things like PlaceIQ that can bring that intelligent data layer to drive these technologies, I think it's going to be a bright future.
All right, let's talk about a little bit about that future then, very quickly here. Is that if I say things like, what's the impact on a consumer behavior? What you're doing here with PlaceIQ? What should be the impact of a consumer behavior and expectations? Is there anything that comes to mind? Will we start to ignore this kind of data as well, or are we going to get threatened by how much it knows about us?
Yeah, so I think privacy is a big concern. I don't when I say concern, I'll be very clear. It's a concern in the way it's handled. I think you can take the PC answer with privacy. Let's just for the sake of being controversial,
please,
just for fun. If you look at mobile and you look at these privacy concerns, iPhone tracking, and all of these things that turned out to be misnomers, carrier IQ. I don't want to comment on that, but you start to look at this and you think, well, fundamentally here, it is my belief that just like 15 years ago, when your father thought you were insane to put your credit card information on the internet, literally insane. I remember those, as I'm sure you do, those days very well. What are you, mad? You're going to put your credit card
banking online? Are you crazy?
It's the end of the world, right? The idea that your cell phone knows where it is, and you can opt in to share that data, and you can get some intelligent value back. I believe, just like Facebook and the privacy, in less than 10 years, 5 years' time, you will look back and you will think it was absolutely insane that people were overly concerned about this. Now, I want to be very clear. That concern is absolutely valid. It happens with all new technology shifts, and we need to be sure that consumers are empowered to understand what is going on, it's opt-in, and they're clear about the value they get back. But it is in my belief, just like the whole cookies versus tracking versus UDIDs, this stuff will get sorted out. And just like it always does, there'll be value to everybody in the ecosystem. So I think the future we are moving towards is a future whereby the consumers are empowered to understand why they're sharing that data, how it benefits them, and they should tangibly see a benefit. And I honestly believe, although it's hard to measure, if you look at internet advertising 10 years ago versus today, it may be an imperfect example, but it is better. You get retargeted with products and services that you actually care about. Yeah. You go to a Blue Kai or an X-Late and you look at the consumer segments they understand about you, it's actually becoming pretty relevant. So if I'm going to be sure, if you believe the future of digital is that there will be ad-supported applications and websites, then the reality is advertising is going to support them. And I think it's better for everybody, including the consumers, if you make that advertising meaningful and relevant. And any technology that strives to do that, I think is, if they can do a decent job, is going to have an interesting future. That's the kind of way I look at it.
What about? I mean, this is an interesting one because we brought it up very early on in this episode about census. You said it yourself. I mean, census is a long process, a long form process where we're collecting information and then it's processing it, and 2 years later they release that information, and 5 years later they start collecting it again, and so much changes in that period of time. Massive change. Maybe not whole demographic shifts in neighborhoods, but so much change. I look at something like this, like PlaceIQ, what you're doing is gathering a real-time census. And is that something that you look at and say, in 10 years or 15 years, what we're doing today is going to eliminate the need for human intervention in census collection?
Yeah, so I think this is so yes and no. So yes, I think a lot of these new technologies do enable a tremendous amount of intelligence to be gathered and used. You just have to look at the concept of sharing a location for traffic and community planning, and there's a huge opportunity there. However, there is always going to be a place for the sort of the professional gathered information to build a base, to be one piece that you look at points of interest, right? Crowdsourced points of interest has been a hot button for 5-6 years. It's something I know a little bit about, and we've evaluated all the crowdsourced POI index. We still buy them because there's still too many inaccuracies. So if you take that as a fairly inaccurate proxy for the future, I do believe there's going to be so much digital information created in the future. You will be able to build a pretty meaningful proxy for all of these things you're alluding to. However, I do think there is always going to be a place for the structured, organized, commercial gathering of information. And I think if you meld those two together in the right way, you can have just like an OpenStreetMap, right? OpenStreetMap was built off the Tiger data, and they've done an amazing job building on top of that. In the same way, you build that foundation with the census, you build the additional information on top. I think you're going to have a very interesting understanding of users in a way that's never been enabled before.
So, last kind of future gazing question here is that when you when this matures a little bit, because right now it's clear that this is a service that is necessary. It's clear that this is where we're going to be going, and it's clear that there are hurdles to get over, like privacy and concern of privacy, and they're two different things. But and then adoption and usage, and I believe that everybody has a price. My location or my data has a price affixed to it. It's just what I'm willing to actually accept in exchange for a little bit more personal information. But how does this industry grow up? Is there any impediment right now, aside from that is going to hold this back, or is there anything that needs to happen in order for this to just kind of vault forward and it be accepted and normal?
So it's an interesting question. You touch on a couple of topics there. So as I alluded to a few minutes ago, I'm a big believer in the fact that we'll get past some of these early concerns, which are valid. So I think that the thing that you kind of touch on is also what I was sort of alluding to earlier. Consumers need to understand why and how. Right now is this concept, oh my God, my iPhone is tracking me, and somehow that's going to be made available to my ex-girlfriend, boyfriend. It's not the way the world works, right? And guess what? Your iPhone wasn't actually tracking you. It was a series of caches of locations that were used to make your consumer value proposition much better because you get a quicker fix. So the media takes this, pretty much just spins it out of all proportion because it makes a good story. But it causes a tremendous amount of concern and misinformation to consumers, and also people like Al Franken, right, who want to get on their high horse and pick an emotive issue to talk about, which is what politics does. I'm not going to criticize that. So to get past that, there needs to be a very clear understanding of why, how, what the value is. And what you allude to is very interesting in terms of you have a tremendous amount of information about you that probably you would actually be really willing to share with brands that are going to push you information anyhow. And if you could find a way to do that, either you were remunerated in some obvious way or an unobvious way in terms of you saw less ads and more relevant ads, I think that would be a great value proposition for everybody. Now, that concept has been bandied around for, I don't know, since the 50s perhaps, based marketing, and we've never really got there, and this comes back to my original point. So I truly do believe that right now we have enough information, we have enough smart devices, and I hope as a society we're smart enough to get beyond some of the media hysteria about some of the concerns and say we are going to enable a much more efficient economy of advertising, marketing, messaging, and consumer interaction with all of those pieces. And I think it's a fascinating space, and I do believe we're just at the beginning stages, and over the next few years there's some tremendously interesting stuff going to happen in this ecosystem.
Listen, Duncan, I can't thank you enough for doing this. The conversation is so great because you're on the threshold of something so incredible and so large. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this. Tell people how they can find out more information about PlaceIQ.
Yeah, absolutely. So all the usual channels. There's no iPhone app to download, but at PlaceIQ on Twitter, we should have some announcements coming soon in terms of some partners we're working with, some great customers. PlaceIQ.com. I will start blogging at some point. My investors keep telling me that. And then so we got some interesting stuff coming. And when we move to New York, we're really excited to be part of that tech ecosystem there and get involved. So really appreciate you having me on. And I encourage you users to really think about this and learn more. And any questions, shoot me an email. Find us on Twitter. We'd love to engage.
That's great. Duncan, thank you so much for doing this. Folks, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, wherever you happen to be doing that, I really appreciate the fact that you have taken a moment to listen to this or watch this. It means the world to me, and I'd love to hear some feedback, and I'm sure Duncan would as well. If you've engaged with PlaceIQ, if you've worked with their service, if you've been a victim of their late-night ads for late-night food, reach out. Let me know. untetheredgmail.com. I really appreciate the fact that you do this. Thank you so much for doing it day after day. Duncan, thank you so much for being a part of this. We'll see you next time on untethered.tv. See you later, everybody.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.